The sun beat down on the bustling streets of Beirut. It was a day like any other. Merchants hawked their wares. Children chased each other through the crowded marketplace. The scent of spices and freshly baked bread wafted from nearby shops. Life unfolded under the clear blue sky. Lebanon had found a fragile peace. The echoes of past conflicts lingered, yet a resilient spirit thrived. People went about their daily lives, but on this seemingly ordinary day, a sinister secret lurked. The peace was about to be shattered. A deafening roar tore through the air, shattering the illusion of peace. The ground trembled, buildings shook, and a cloud of dust and debris rose towards the sky. Panic seized the city as people scrambled for safety, their faces etched with fear and confusion. The marketplace, once a symphony of sounds and smells, was now a scene of utter chaos. Screams pierced the air as people searched frantically for loved ones amidst the rubble. The sweet scent of spices was replaced by the acrid smell of smoke and fire. The initial shock soon gave way to a chilling realization. This was no accident. This was a deliberate act, a terrifying display of violence that left the city reeling. The question on everyone's mind was, who was responsible? As the dust settled, a horrifying truth began to emerge. The explosion, it turned out, was no isolated incident. Across the city, similar explosions rocked the streets, each blast claiming more innocent lives. The targets, seemingly random, a crowded cafe, a busy street corner, a residential building. The authorities were baffled. There were no claims of responsibility, no warnings, no apparent motive. The city was gripped by fear and uncertainty. Whispers of a hidden war, fought in the shadows with unseen enemies and invisible weapons, began to circulate. Among the victims, a pattern emerged. Many were members of Hezbollah, the powerful political and military organization. The attacks, it seemed, were not random after all. They were targeted strikes aimed at the heart of Hezbollah's network. Then came the most chilling revelation of all. The weapon responsible for the carnage was not a bomb in the traditional sense. It was something far more insidious, far more terrifying, exploding pages. These seemingly innocuous devices, once symbols of connectivity, had been transformed into deadly weapons. Remotely detonated, they turned everyday objects into instruments of death, shattering the illusion of safety and security. The world watched in horror as the details unfolded. The exploding pager was not just a weapon, it was a symbol of a new era of warfare, one where the lines between civilian and combatant were blurred and the enemy could strike anytime, anywhere. This was a war fought in the shadows, a war where technology was the weapon and fear was the ultimate objective. The initial shock of the explosions gave way to a chilling panic that spread through the streets of Beirut. People ran in terror, desperate to escape the invisible enemy. The air was thick with smoke and fear, choking the senses. Sirens wailed, a reminder of the carnage. Ambulances raced through the streets, ferrying the wounded. Doctors and nurses worked tirelessly, battling to save lives. As the dust settled, the details of the attack began to emerge, each revelation more chilling than the last. The weapon of choice was not a sophisticated bomb, but the humble pager. This once symbol of connectivity had been transformed into a deadly weapon. The thought that something so ordinary could inflict such terror sent shivers down spines. The pagers, rigged with explosives, were detonated remotely, turning everyday objects into instruments of death. The finger of blame quickly pointed towards Israel, the old enemy, the shadow that loomed large over Lebanon's tumultuous history. Whispers of Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, echoed through the streets, fueling the flames of anger and resentment. Hezbollah, the target of the attack, wasted no time in accusing Israel of orchestrating the bombings, their words laced with fury and a thirst for revenge. The evidence, they claimed, was clear. The precision of the attacks, the targeting of Hezbollah members, the use of sophisticated technology all pointed towards Israel's involvement. Israel, as was their custom, remained tight-lipped, refusing to confirm or deny their involvement. Their silence, however, spoke volumes. It was a silence pregnant with meaning, a tacit acknowledgement of their role in the unfolding drama. Hezbollah, reeling from the attack, vowed swift and decisive retribution. Their words, delivered with a chilling calmness that belied the fury burning beneath the surface, sent a tremor through the region. The message was clear. There would be consequences, a reckoning for the blood that had been spilled. The city of Beirut, once a vibrant hub of commerce and culture, transformed into a tinderbox, poised on the brink of explosion. Armed checkpoints sprung up across the city, manned by Hezbollah fighters, their faces grim, their fingers never straying far from the triggers of their weapons. The atmosphere was thick with tension, a palpable sense of dread hanging heavy in the air. The specter of violence, of retaliation and counter-retaliation, cast a long shadow over the city, leaving its inhabitants trapped in a state of perpetual fear and uncertainty. Life in Beirut, once a delicate dance between resilience and resignation, took on a new dimension of fear. The streets, once teeming with life, were eerily quiet, the laughter and chatter of daily life replaced by a tense silence. People moved with a cautious urgency, their eyes darting nervously, scanning their surroundings for any sign of danger. The simplest of tasks, once taken for granted, became fraught with risk. A trip to the market, a visit to a friend, even a walk in the park could turn deadly in an instant. The fear was insidious, seeping into every aspect of daily life, poisoning relationships, fueling paranoia, and eroding the fragile fabric of society. It was a fear that knew no boundaries, respecting neither age nor innocence, a constant companion that whispered darkly of unseen dangers and imminent threats. The exploding pages sent shockwaves through Hezbollah, a stark reminder of their vulnerability. This wasn't the traditional warfare they were accustomed to, the open battles and artillery duels. This was a surgical strike, a whisper of death delivered with chilling precision. It struck at the heart of their sense of security, exposing the soft underbelly of their vast network. Yet, Hezbollah was far from defeated. Their response, though measured, was laced with a steely resolve. They would hunt down those responsible, their vengeance swift and merciless. Lebanon, a nation precariously balanced on a knife's edge, teetered on the brink. The pager bombings were not just an attack on Hezbollah. They were an assault on the very fabric of Lebanese society. The fragile peace, painstakingly pieced together after years of civil war, threatened to shatter under the strain. Sectarian tensions, long simmering beneath the surface, flared anew. Accusations flew back and forth. Fingers pointed. Old wounds were ripped open. The streets, once a testament to Lebanon's resilience and diversity, became battle lines, dividing neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. The attack had exposed the deep divisions that still ran through the heart of the nation. It was a stark reminder of the fragility of peace, the ease with which it could be shattered by the winds of hatred and violence. The Lebanese government found itself caught in a political quagmire. On the one hand, they had to be seen to be taking decisive action against those responsible for the bombings. On the other hand, they were acutely aware of the need to maintain stability to prevent the country from sliding back into chaos. Their response was cautious, almost hesitant. They condemned the attacks, of course, but stopped short of directly accusing Israel. They launched an investigation, but few held out hope for a swift or conclusive outcome. The government's dilemma was a microcosm of Lebanon's larger predicament. Torn between competing loyalties, fearful of igniting a wider conflict, they were forced to tread a fine line. Their every move scrutinized by both internal and external forces. The international community, as is often the case, responded to the bombings with a chorus of condemnation. Statements were issued, resolutions were passed, expressions of concern were abundant, but concrete action, meaningful measures to address the root causes of the violence, remained elusive. The United Nations, hamstrung by its own internal divisions, proved incapable of providing a coherent or effective response. The United States, Israel's staunch ally, offered words of support, but little else. The lack of a unified and decisive international response only served to embolden the perpetrators. It sent a clear message that violence, even on this scale, would be met with little more than empty rhetoric. As days turned into weeks, a palpable sense of dread settled over Lebanon. The threat of a wider conflict loomed large. The bombings had rekindled old hatreds. The streets of Beirut were eerily quiet. Fear stifled joy and hope. Lebanon, a testament to resilience, teetered on the edge. The exploding pages in Beirut sent a tremor that rippled far beyond Lebanon's borders. The Golan Heights, that volatile strip of land straddling the Syrian-Israeli border, felt the reverberations with a palpable anxiety. Here, old enemies eyed each other with suspicion across a tense, demilitarized zone, the ghosts of past conflicts casting long shadows. Israel, ever vigilant, bolstered its military presence along the border. Tanks rumbled into position, their barrels pointed towards Syria. A silent but potent reminder of Israel's military might. Hezbollah's presence in southern Lebanon, their ties to Iran, added another layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. The Golan Heights, a strategic prize coveted by both sides, had become a powder keg, a spark away from igniting a regional conflagration. The fear was that a miscalculation, a provocation, or a simple misunderstanding could set off a chain reaction with devastating consequences. The pager bombings were not just an attack on Hezbollah. They were a calculated move in a much larger game, a high-stakes power play unfolding across the Middle East. The region, a cauldron of ancient rivalries and modern ambitions, was undergoing a seismic shift, with alliances realigning and old certainties crumbling. Iran, Hezbollah's patron and Israel's arch-nemesis, watched the events in Beirut with a mix of concern and opportunity. The attack, they knew, had weakened Hezbollah, but it had also inflamed anti-Israeli sentiment across the region. Deep within Tehran's corridors of power, the Ayatollahs huddled in contemplation. News from Beirut demanded a measured response. The attack on Hezbollah could not go unanswered. Retaliation had to be carefully calibrated. A direct confrontation with Israel was out of the question. Iran was not ready for a full-scale war. The Ayatollah saw opportunities in the chaos. He would bide his time and exploit the situation. The pager bombings in Beirut presented Washington with a foreign policy dilemma of the highest order. The United States, Israel's staunchest ally, found itself caught in the middle of a volatile situation, facing a complex web of competing interests and potential consequences. On the one hand, the U.S. was committed to Israel's security, obligated by treaty and tradition to stand by their side in times of crisis. On the other hand, the last thing the U.S. wanted was another Middle Eastern war, especially one that could draw in Iran and destabilize the entire region. The Biden administration, already grappling with multiple crises on the global stage, was forced to tread carefully. They condemned the attacks, of course, but stopped short of directly accusing Iran. They urged restraint on all sides, but their words rang hollow in the face of the escalating tensions. The world watched the unfolding events in the Middle East with a mixture of apprehension and resignation. The pager bombings in Beirut were a stark reminder of the region's volatility, its propensity for violence, its resistance to peaceful solutions. The international community, as is so often the case, seemed powerless to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. The United Nations, hamstrung by its own internal divisions, could offer little more than words of condemnation. The European Union, preoccupied with its own internal problems, seemed content to sit on the sidelines. The Middle East, it seemed, was once again on the brink. The question was, would the key players be able to step back from the abyss, or would the region be consumed by the flames of another senseless war? The exploding pages of Beirut weren't just a weapon. They were a horrifying message. Ordinary turned deadly, mundane into terror. A new age of terror, where technology hums lethal, a chilling fusion of low-tech and high-tech. Nowhere was safe, not anymore. Our gadgets, extensions of ourselves, turned against us. The Beirut bombings brought into sharp focus a chilling truth. The battlefields of the future wouldn't be confined to faraway lands, fought with tanks and troops. They would be fought in the ethereal realm of cyberspace, where invisible armies wage silent wars. Their weapons lines of code and digital detonators. This was the new face of conflict, insidious and pervasive, capable of crippling infrastructure, disrupting economies, and sowing chaos with a few keystrokes. The exploding pages were just a taste of what was possible, a gruesome appetizer in a digital feast of potential mayhem. The perpetrators, whoever they were, had demonstrated a mastery of cyber warfare, a deep understanding of the vulnerabilities of our interconnected world. They had exposed the Achilles heel of modern society, our reliance on technology, our blind faith in the digital networks that course through our lives like vital arteries. The events in Beirut read like something out of a Tom Clancy thriller, a terrifying glimpse into a future where the lines between reality and fiction blurred, where the stuff of nightmares spilled out onto the streets. But this was no Hollywood script, no work of imagination. This was real, terrifyingly real. It spoke of a world where the enemy could be anywhere and everywhere, a ghost in the machine, a phantom hacker lurking in the digital shadows. It was a world where traditional notions of warfare, of battlefields and front lines had become obsolete, replaced by a chilling new reality where the enemy could strike anytime, anywhere, without warning. The Beirut bombing served as a wake-up call, a stark reminder that the future of warfare had arrived, and it was far more insidious, far more unsettling than anything we could have imagined. In the aftermath of the Beirut bombings, a chilling question hung in the air. If a simple pager could be turned into a lethal weapon, what about the myriad other devices that surrounded us? The smartphones in our pockets, the computers on our desks, the smart appliances in our homes. The answer, as unsettling as it was, seemed increasingly clear. Anything connected to a network, anything with a circuit board and a bit of code could potentially be weaponized. Our world, once a tapestry of interconnected devices designed to make our lives easier, was rapidly transforming into a minefield of potential threats. The implications were staggering. It meant that the electronic battlefield had expanded to encompass our homes, our workplaces, our very lives. It meant that the enemy could be listening to our conversations, monitoring our movements, even controlling our devices, all without us ever knowing. The Beirut bombings ushered in a new era of fear, one where the enemy was invisible, the weapon elusive, and the threat omnipresent. It was a fear that gnawed at the edges of our consciousness, a constant low-grade anxiety that poisoned our peace of mind. Every network a potential backdoor for a faceless enemy. The price of connectivity seemed to be the erosion of our privacy, our security, and ultimately our freedom. The Beirut bombings forced a difficult conversation upon the world. How do we reconcile our desire for security with our commitment to freedom? It's a delicate balancing act, pitting our liberties against real dangers. Some argue for increased surveillance, giving governments greater powers to monitor our digital lives. Others warn it would erode our freedoms, creating a society where Big Brother is always watching. The Beirut bombings changed the game. The Beirut bombings presented the world with a chilling puzzle, a deadly enigma wrapped in layers of complexity. The most pressing question was simple: why? What were the motives behind this brutal act of terror? The answers were fragmented, reflecting different perspectives and hidden agendas. Some saw the bombings as a desperate act of retaliation, a furious response to some perceived provocation. Others viewed them as a calculated move in a larger game. One theory that circulated in the aftermath of the bombings was that they were not intended as a mass casualty event, but rather as a series of targeted assassinations. The victims, many of whom were Hezbollah officials or operatives, seemed to support this hypothesis. The use of exploding pages, a seemingly antiquated technology, lent credence to this idea. The pages, easily traceable to specific individuals, could have been used to deliver deadly payloads with surgical precision, eliminating key targets without the collateral damage of a traditional bomb attack. If this was indeed the case, it spoke to a chilling level of sophistication on the part of the attackers. It suggested a deep understanding of Hezbollah's inner workings, the ability to identify and track key individuals, and the technical prowess to execute a complex operation with deadly accuracy. Another interpretation of the Beirut bombings viewed them not as a purely tactical strike, but as a symbolic act of violence, a message delivered in the brutal language of terror. The target in this view was not just Hezbollah, but the Lebanese people themselves, their sense of security, their fragile peace. The message, if that's what it was chillingly clear. No one was safe, not anymore. The enemy, whoever they were, could strike anytime, anywhere with impunity. It was a message designed to sow fear, to erode trust, to shatter the fragile social fabric that held the nation together. The use of exploding pages, seemingly mundane objects turned into instruments of death, only amplified the message's unsettling effect. It spoke to a chilling ingenuity, a willingness to exploit the very tools of modern life for nefarious purposes. The Beirut bombings also served as a stark reminder of Lebanon's precarious position in the region, caught in the crosshairs of a larger proxy war between more powerful actors. Hezbollah, Iran's proxy, had long been a thorn in the side of Israel, and many saw the bombings as a calculated attempt to weaken the group and undermine Iranian influence in the region. Israel, though it denied any involvement in the attacks, had both the motive and the means to carry them out. The use of sophisticated technology, the precision of the strikes, and the timing of the attacks all pointed towards a state-sponsored actor with a vested interest in disrupting Hezbollah's operations. The bombings, in this context, were not just an isolated incident, but a bloody chapter in a much longer and more complex conflict, one where Lebanon was but a pawn in a larger game played by more powerful forces. In the aftermath of the Beirut bombings, as the dust settled and the initial shock subsided, a different kind of battle began. The battle for narrative, the struggle to control the flow of information and shape the public's perception of events. Accusations flew back and forth, fueled by political agendas, media sensationalism, and the fog of war that inevitably descends in such situations. Truth, as is often the case in such conflicts, became an early casualty, lost in a maze of conflicting accounts, half-truths, and outright propaganda. The bombings served as a stark reminder of the power of information warfare, the ability to influence public opinion and shape the course of events through the manipulation of perception. Many questions remain unanswered. Who were the perpetrators? What were their true motives? And what were the long-term consequences of this act of terror? The bombings left an indelible scar on the Lebanese psyche, a haunting reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present threat of violence. They also underscored the complexities of the region, the tangled web of alliances and rivalries, and the challenges of finding lasting solutions to deeply rooted conflicts. The Beirut bombings, like so many other acts of terror before them, served as a stark reminder of the human capacity for both great evil and extraordinary resilience. They challenged us to confront the root causes of violence, to seek justice for the victims, and to strive for a world where such acts of barbarity are relegated to the dustbin of history. The deafening explosions have shattered Beirut's fragile peace. The rubble of the buildings and the streets are devastating. There is no normalcy. The city bears unhealed scars. The memory lingers, a reminder of vulnerability and fear. Physical wounds may heal, but psychological scars run deep. The city's psyche remains fragmented, haunted by that day. The true tragedy of the exploding pages lies not just in the immediate devastation, but in the long shadow it cast over an entire generation. Children, their innocence shattered by the sudden eruption of violence, grew up under the weight of unspoken trauma, their laughter forever tinged with a note of caution. The youth on the cusp of adulthood found their dreams clouded by the specter of uncertainty. The promise of a brighter future, once so tangible, now seemed like a distant mirage, obscured by the dust of shattered hopes and broken promises. The exploding pages stole more than lives. They stole a sense of security, a belief in the possibility of lasting peace. They left behind a generation grappling with the invisible wounds of trauma, struggling to reconcile the carefree spirit of youth with the harsh realities of a world where violence could erupt without warning. In the aftermath of the bombings, Beirut found itself trapped in a perpetual state of uneasy peace, a city held hostage by the fear of its own past. The threat of violence hummed beneath the surface of everyday life, a patchwork of checkpoints and security measures, a constant reminder of the ever-present threat. The quest for justice, for the perpetrators to be held accountable, became a long and winding road, fraught with obstacles and frustrations. The investigation, hampered by political sensitivities, seemed to stall before it even began. The perpetrators remained elusive, their identities a matter of speculation and rumor. The families of the victims, their grief compounded by a profound sense of injustice, were left to grapple with the agonizing reality that true closure might forever remain out of reach. Yet, despite the setbacks and the fading hope, the pursuit of justice remained an essential act, a testament to the enduring belief that even in the face of unspeakable horror, truth and accountability mattered. For without justice, there could be no true healing, no genuine reconciliation, only the festering wound of unresolved pain. Amidst the trauma and fear, a different narrative emerged, the story of Beirut's resilience and indomitable spirit. The city picked itself up and began rebuilding, not just its structures, but its social fabric. The spirit of defiance resonated in the streets and cafes, in the hearts of its people. Beirut embraced its scars as badges of honor, testaments to its enduring strength.